Thank you all for coming out this morning, and we are in 1 Samuel chapter 21. And David is sliding down a slippery slope in his having to try to think on his feet, and my assessment of the situation is he somewhere in here lost his boldness, and I think the reason for that is because he might have stopped looking for his answers from God directly. And typically you'll see when he's on the right path, he's inquiring of the Lord. You'll see that in around last chapter 22. Toward the in chapter 22, he comes back and starts doing that again. Chapter 23, right in there. But we're in chapter 21. Now, what's happened is and I sent out an email to this effect. If anybody got it, sorry, I wanted to get it out earlier, but I just couldn't get my work done quick enough. But
it was very creative writing. It was very.
Did you get it?
Yes,
okay.
I got it.
Right.
So, yeah, so, like you've spent a lot. That's very creative. Very.
Well,
I didn't get it.
I
can sell it to you.
You might have to check your email when you come home from your Friday night event. Sometimes it's
I
waiting
checked
for
it
you.
this morning and I didn't see
Oh,
it.
really? Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you. Anybody else get it?
I got it.
I got it.
Well, we'll have to look into that.
When did you send it?
About 7
7:10 p.m.
Yes.
Yeah.
Precisely.
So David has gone back, as you know, or as you recall, to talk to Jonathan. They had their conversation. They came up with their plan, and now David is heading, after having first gone to the man of God. He's now heading for the house of God, okay, which is in Nob, and that's where we pick up with chapter 21. So I'm just going to read through some of this, and we'll get this under our belt a little bit, and maybe make a little bit of commentary along the way. And if you have a question or a comment along the way, just get my attention. Then came David to Nob to Ahimelech the priest, and Ahimelech was afraid at the meeting of David, and said unto him, Why art thou alone, and no man with thee? Now, when I encounter, like these kinds of questions, and when I see that someone is afraid, these are emotions that are there, it always makes me want to ask, why? So, why, on the surface of it, David's a well-known person in the kingdom and well thought of. So why would you think Ahimelech, the priest, would be afraid right now?
The priest is going to be in trouble or something that'll affect him personally.
I'm sorry, what verse are you on?
Verse 1, chapter 21, verse 1.
Maybe because he knew Saul's opinion of David.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously the word has gotten out. It has to have gotten out that Saul is after David. But then that brings into question David's story that he's getting ready to tell as to its plausibility under the circumstances. Does it not? True.
Well, I don't know if he necessarily knew that Saul was actively pursuing David at this time, because this is right after David leaves, after Jonathan shoots the arrows, right? So, Saul might not be actively after him at this point, but he asked the question, why are you alone? It's with you. And I think that's probably the reason he figured something was up, is because, David was one of the king's right-hand men in a way, and they would often travel with really large companies. And so the fact that he was there by himself, and I'm sure, he knew that there was tension between David and Saul, because that was obvious for a while. And so it was probably a combination of those two things that makes him question, something's wrong.
Right.
Is this the Goliath place? I read something.
Not yet. We will get to that. This chapter has 2 phases in it. We're doing the first phase where he's at Nob, where the tabernacle is. Okay, Bob.
Just read, excuse me. In the Bible, it's from reference. The word meaning there is pronounced Hiral, which means an encounter, but friendly or hostile. So the priest may have, when it says he was afraid, that means he was kind of frightened, not that he was like scared, or it was like he was kind of like somebody surprises you if they come around the corner.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Thank you for looking that up.
Dave shows up with his company of men.
It says he's by himself. It says, why are you alone? I think the issue is, why are you here by yourself? He's saying, that's strange.
Well, that brings up another question. So is David by himself? Okay, what do you think?
God is in his presence.
Okay. Any other men with David?
No.
Bob?
I think he had a men with him. He's not by himself. And the reason I say that is because David had men that were loyal to him and followed him wherever he went. And I think when he said that he's behind thou alone and no man with thee, that they're talking about people who would represent the king. He alone is the only one who can represent the king.
Okay, any other scriptural evidence
So verse 5,
for
David talks
being-
about the young men that are supposedly holy and they need some food.
So David's in his dialogue here, he's talking about some other men, right? So is there truthfulness in his story?
So, I don't know
Are you
what-
going to give him the benefit of the doubt there's some other men here? Or does anybody have any other scripture that would corroborate that he's got other men with him?
Verse 5 seems pretty
Fred, what do you
clear.
think?
Well, I haven't read this. Would it help for us to read through this?
Well, we're just on verse 1. That's all we're at right now.
Oh, I thought
it's not going to be in the chapter, okay?
Okay.
So if you have other scripture, you're going to find it in the New Testament.
And in verse 5, tell us that there's men there?
Not really. Well, David's testimony is he's got a story he's telling.
Oh,
The
David,
the whole problem here when you're reading it, hang on just a second, Bob. The whole problem when you're reading it is he starts fabricating a story. I'm on a secret mission by the king. Okay, is that true? Okay.
Everything he's saying, you can't
Okay,
trust him.
that's not true. So everything that follows in David's testimony becomes suspect, right? So the only way you really can know for sure, in my opinion, is you have to turn to the New Testament, Bob.
Not you necessarily turn the New Testament. You can also just go forward in Samuel,
Okay, what do you have?
24th chapter. And this is when David spares Saul's life when they're in the cave. And in other places, this is the first that's it. So David stayed his servants with his words, and it talks about, and David stopped his men.
Now, what chapter is that?
Chapter 24.
Okay, so between chapter 24 and chapter 21, where we are now, we have a whole bunch of things that gets thrown in the mix. For example, he's going to go to a cave at the beginning of chapter 22, and his whole family is going to join him, and then you're going to have a bunch of men, up to 400 men, 400 I think, that join him there, and that's before you even get to chapter 24. But what we're talking about is right now here at the tabernacle, when he's left Saul's court, do we have any other...
Is it Matthew?
The reason I'm asking this, the reason it's important is because we're trying to figure out which part of his story is true and which part of it's not true.
So we can't really just trust David.
Is it okay if I cheat?
Go ahead.
Use resources.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a Bible study.
Cross references.
Okay.
Mark 2:25.
Okay.
Jesus is talking to the Pharisees, and he said unto them, "Have you never read what David did when he had need and was hungered, he and they that were with him? How he went into the house of God in the days of Abiathar the high priest, and did eat the showbread, which is not lawful to eat but for the priest, and gave also to them that were with him."
So Jesus' testimony comes into play.
So is Jesus saying it's okay for David to have kind of fabricated this story?
No, but Jesus
No.
is saying that
He says-
he had some with him,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
the
he says it
point.
was
So let's move along to
What
verse
was the-
2.
What was the reference for that?
Mark 2:25 and 26.
2:25 and 26.
Yep.
Right. So let's move on to verse 2. And David said unto Ahimelech the priest, The king hath commanded me a business, and hath said unto me. Now David's telling the priest a story. You can decide whether it's a true story or not. The king hath commanded me a business, and hath said unto me, Let no man know anything of the business whereabout I send thee, and what I have commanded thee, and I have appointed my servants to such and such a place. Now David here is saying that his men are at such and such a place. That's what he's telling the priest, if you understand that. Now therefore, what is under thine hand? Basically, what you got in the cupboard, or what you got in the kitchen. Give me 5 loaves of bread in mine hand, or what there is present. And the priest answered David and said, There is no common bread under mine hand, but there is hallowed bread, if the young men have kept themselves at least from women. Now let me just make a little comment here. So basically, the priests would make bread for themselves, and they would make bread that they use in the temple, tabernacle, as sort of an offering. And some of this bread was set aside. Apparently, none of the common bread was available, and they would make new bread prior to the Sabbath, which would be Saturday. And so this was probably probably Thursday, Wednesday or Thursday, because it was several days after the new moon. So we're right around the time when new bread needs to get made. And basically, you see in the rest of the chapter, the priest references that they'll just make some more. I'm going to give you this too, because we're getting ready to make some more, basically. And David answered the priest and said, I read that, verse 6. So the priest gave him hallowed bread, for there was no bread there but the showbread that was taken from before the Lord, to put hot bread in the day when it was taken away. And that's what I just mentioned in verse from what I was just saying. Verse 7, Now a certain man of the servants of Saul was there that day, detained before the Lord, and his name was Doeg, an Edomite, and the chiefest of the herdmen that belongeth to Saul. And you have to ask, why is he here? And because this is like if you're watching a movie and you're watching this scene, and all of a sudden they cut the camera to this villainous character who's looking in some unscrupulous way, and there's eye contact between them, and David knows that this guy's there, and all of a sudden he knows his story is not going to hold up. And so from here on, he's having to kind of figure out what he's going to do, because he's not going to be able to stick around here, obviously. So what I want to ask you this right now is, up until this point in David's life, he has demonstrated an ability to know what to do because he sought guidance from the Lord, and he got clear guidance from the Lord. Do we see any evidence here that he's getting his guidance from the Lord right now? Okay? And remember, I started this whole series with, I said, I want to tie this into the phases of our lives as we go through life. And oftentimes, someone said this, I didn't say it, the seed of our spiraling downfall is planted in the bed of success. We have a successful situation, and we start getting complacent in our lives. We think things are going well, and we let our guard down. And the root of the downward spiral you'll often see, whether it's in the Bible or in the lives of men today. You see very successful men, you see it in the news just about every day, being brought down because they took their high positions of power, and David's not in his high position of power yet, but they take this, they're living in a successful situation, and they start taking liberties. And what I'm here to say is, you start looking across the board, and people who have built up their success through discipline and character and all those things often will find if they start relaxing and they start losing the thing that got them where they are, they will spiral into decline. And Bob, go ahead.
I was reading a portion about Proverbs, and a commentator this week, Dr. Williams says, made a statement that was kind of funny, but yet was profound. He says, we are all just one decision away from stupid, but God gave us power to keep us from being stupid. He was emphasizing why the Proverbs are written for us. But so many times, when we're in those situations, and everything's going great, it's kind of like the two boys who were walking along the riverbank and saw a boat sitting there. Thought, well, this would be a good opportunity. Let's just get a boat and go out to the river. Well, the paddle was broken to get out of the river, and they were talking and having fun. Without realizing, they were drifting until they heard the roar of the falls. They were about to go, and they started paddling. Fortunately, they got to the shore, but the boat still went over. And so much time it's like we get, like you said, complacent. And little did we realize that we're drifting. It was just like, you know, my father used to always tell me, after I got married, son, you keep her like you got her.
That's right.
And much is to our salvation. It's not that we have to keep our salvation, but we need to keep close to God, and we have to keep close to God by being daily into His Word, and because men, we get to the point where we think we have arrived, we're in trouble.
Yeah. That's good marriage advice too, by the way.
Bob, that was great, Bob. 'Cause, you know, we think our life's just going to go on like it is every day. It's just going to be, today's going to be like yesterday and everything. But like you said, all it takes is one time to do one thing that's wrong. And we may be careless, have an accident, kill a pedestrian, all of a sudden our life is, we need to realize it only goes because we need to be very alert. You know?
Right.
I went from one Sunday evening service, leaving Columbia Good, and about 4 o'clock Monday morning I was in the hospital, and by Tuesday morning I was...
This week?
No. Back in
Oh, okay.
But your life changed all of a sudden.
Yeah, okay.
My life changed
That quick.
that quick.
Right. Yeah. You know, I wanted to mention this to you along the way. We didn't talk about this last week, but I was reading something this week that kind of made a little bit of sense. I thought I'd throw it into the mix. You know, when Saul was expecting David to come and be in attendance on the first of the new moon feast, the previous chapter, which is the end of chapter 19, Saul is prophesying. You know, laying prostrate, prophesying. And Samuel is apparently there. And I'm wondering if Samuel had talked Saul into, you know, trying to work things out with David. Because remember, Samuel intends for David to succeed, you know, and because he anointed him, right? And so and David, he mentions that he has to be, when he's talking to Jonathan, he mentions he's expected to be at the meal. And so I thought it might be that Samuel told David to go on back and, you know, things will work out. Just trust the Lord, or something to that effect. But what happens is, and when I want to point out the seed of someone's spiraling out of, you know, in a downward slippery slope, is to me starts when David says in chapter, I think it's 20, yeah. He says to Jonathan, I'm trying to find the actual verse, that he's a step away from death with Saul because of the situation with Saul. I can't remember exactly which verse that is, but he describes it as a step away from death. They may see that verse by any chance. It's right should be towards the front of chapter chapter 20,
Verse 3,
3.
the end of the verse.
Thank you. Yeah, he says, David's talking to Jonathan, he says, Thy father certainly knoweth that I have found grace in thine eyes, and he saith, Let not Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved. But truly, as the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, there is but a step between me and death. And I was thinking, how does a man who has been called and been anointed by Samuel and been told that he is going to become the leader of the nation, I think that's what he's been told, how does he think he's going to die? And so this is, to me, the problem with David is what he's thinking, which again kind of foreshadows the message that I sent in the email, what were you thinking? It starts in our heads. It starts in our mind. How we think, as a man thinketh, so is he, right? Who wrote that? Okay, does it mean where that verse is? As a man thinketh, so is he. Does it know where that's at?
So we need to meditate on truth. That's instead of our assumptions, our lies, a hearsay, we need to say, now, wait a minute, is this in the truth category or not? Just meditate on truth.
Okay, well, so if somebody wants to get to that, find that verse, I'd like to make sure we know where it is. But I just wanted to throw that in because I really believe that that's where this whole downward spiral starts. And so David is obviously seeking some kind of security here. That's why he ran to Samuel first. You know, when you get in trouble, don't you want to go run to a man of God? Isn't that what you do? Samuel's the one who anointed him. So he went there because that made sense, didn't it? And I think Samuel kind of shooed him on back to where he belonged, back to the king's court. That's why he was there. But David, I believe, started thinking wrong, took matters into his hands, and now he says, well, I'm going to run, I'll go to the house of God, the tabernacle. He goes there. Sounds good. Good, sounds reasonable, doesn't it? Except when he gets there, which is where we are today, Ahimelech is there and is suspicious. And David starts fabricating these stories that we're talking about. And that's where we are now. So let's continue on with our lesson here because we need to move along. We got to cover some tracks here.
Proverbs 23:7.
Proverbs 23:7.
For as he thinketh in his heart, so is he. Eat and drink, safe to be.
Okay, that's one version of it. The actual verse, that's a good one. But as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Is how it goes. Yeah. So that's another verse that contains that. So let's go back to chapter 21 and continue with. I mentioned in verse 8 that Doeg was there, and Doeg is probably there because it says he was detained. He was detained before the Lord. Different people, offer suggestions about what that was. Either he was in some kind of trouble and he was there, like almost like a detention. Somebody said that. Some people thought it was an uncleanness. Maybe he had some kind of leprosy, or he had to be approved to some physical skin issue that would cause him to have to be approved by the priest, and he was sequestered, until that was resolved. We don't know why he was there, but he was detained there for a reason. He probably didn't want to be there. And for all I know, he didn't care for the priests. Now, why do I say that? Because he's really in it for himself. And what we're going to find out is he's going to rat on everybody. When no one will stand up for Saul, and Saul is quizzing everybody's loyalty and says, how come somebody doesn't come and tell me about, David and what's going on, and his coercion with my son Jonathan? Why is nobody stepping forward and talking to me, And that's going to happen.
So then he gets.
And Doeg says, King, this is what I saw. I saw the priest. I saw him talking to David, giving him showbread, giving him the sword, and I saw him talk to the Lord in David's behalf. which is not true. That part's not true. Bob?
But later on, David has a great deal to say about Doeg. He wrote an entire psalm about it.
Psalm 52, right? Yeah. And I referenced that in the, did I put that in the email? I meant to if I didn't. Psalm 56 is another psalm that you can look to that references these events.
You said
By the way,
Psalm 56.
52 and 56 both reference these events. Okay. So David says basically to Ahimelech, don't you have any weapons, basically? And we come to find out in verse 8 that he's saying he doesn't have any weapons with him. Verse 9, the priest offers the sword of Goliath, the Philistine, whom thou slewest in the valley of Elah. Behold, it is here, wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If thou wilt take that, take it, for there is no other save that here. And David said, there is none like that. Give it me. And so he's got this big old sword. I mean, I was trying to think, how in the world is he carrying that thing over his shoulder, you know? I mean, if you put it on his hip, it'd be dragging the ground. I was just trying to imagine. And he takes us back to his comrades. And can you imagine what the conversation must have been about? Like, what? How are we supposed to defend ourselves with that thing? But David says, I got a plan. You know, we're gonna. And I can just imagine him trying to tell, you know, his comrades, where are we going? Well, we're going down here to Gath. Gath? Bob.
You know, what strikes me on this, when I read this verse, after you sent the email, was, you know, when he was trusting in the Lord, he didn't ask for any weapon other than what the Lord equipped him with, which was a sling,
Yeah.
stone.
Yeah.
And now that he's not trusting the Lord, he thinks that he has to have some huge weapon.
Right.
Because he's fearful and he's not trusting the Lord now.
He's desperate.
You know, back when he was trusting the Lord, he was just content with what the Lord gave him to fight his battles. And we fall into the same category sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, when we're trusting the Lord, we're content with what he gives us, regardless of what it is and what situation we're in and circumstances. But when we're trying to trust in ourselves, it seems like we're trying to call and fight because we're fearful to get things to try to satisfy our need or whatever it is ourselves, and then we just really make a mess out of it. But that just struck me when I read that after I sent that. I was thinking, well, why God did he need this huge weapon when he was trusting a sling before?
Right. You know, I think, and you guys tell me what you think about this, but I think that when we're walking in the Spirit, we get a boldness. I think God gives us a boldness to rise to the occasions so that when things look like with the situation with Goliath, you know, he just had a holy boldness about him. And I think that when we're walking in the Spirit, we have that boldness, and the Spirit guides us into what to do. But when we're not walking in the Spirit and we see the big wave, we're going to be just like the disciples. We're going to be fearful. And we're going to be afraid that God's not going to take care of us. And we start looking at the wave instead of the master of the wave, you know. And this is so much what our flesh does. And we start then concocting, strategizing, trying to come up with a plan to figure our way out of the situation. And this is where we start going down the wrong road so often. True.
I think we see a lot of examples of that, and I think it happens a lot to us guys, especially who, you know, like to have control of the situation. Especially when we've been told something's going to happen and we feel like it's not going to happen, we automatically try to, you know, come up with ways to make it happen. You can see, you know, Abraham did the same thing. He was promised a son,
Yeah.
and he's like, well, you know, I got to make it happen. And then Jacob, you know, dealing with Esau, and then later with Laban, and just, you know, all of his different schemes and designs in there to make, you know, to make himself blessed and to make himself successful. And then the same thing now with David. You know, he's promised that he's going to be a king someday, and he's like, well, it's not happening, you know. Saul's trying to kill me, so, you know, I got to do what I got to do.
Exactly. Anybody else over here on this side?
So we got to help God out.
So what you, what you're saying is, because I'm mixing what you're saying. So you're saying that a Okay, guys, when you want something, when you want it, God ain't gonna give it to you when you want it, but He's gonna give you when you need it, right on time. So therefore, when He's looking at, God ain't moving when He want Him to move.
Right.
So therefore, God, like right now, it's not your, right now, David, it's not your position in time for you to be set in place as king. David wanted right, he said,
Right.
you want it right now. If you can't give it to me now, I don't want it.
Yeah.
So, God, this is a song that they sing. It's a songwriter who wrote the song. It may not come when you want it, but He's an on-time God. Yes, it's by Dottie B. And that song right there by itself puts the end to that.
Yeah, amen. So, yes, sir.
Here's a verse, I don't know. Is this, this is the David wrote this, Psalm 61:2. From the end of the earth I will cry unto thee when my heart is overwhelmed. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I. So it'd be interesting to know when he wrote these psalms. Did he write this at the time these things happened, or later he realized he had a different attitude and of course the Holy Spirit told him to write it?
Yeah, I was thinking about that myself, and I don't really know the answer, but it would seem to me that after you've had time to think about what's happened is the time that you can write something because you have an answer for
a new perspective.
You're putting So let's look at verse 9. Verse 10. I'm sorry. And David rose, fled that day, for fear of Saul. So David, who was not afraid of Goliath, and he wasn't afraid of the entire army of Goliath, is now running for fear of Saul. Just doesn't seem in character, does it? And went to Achish. My stomach's growling. Sorry about that. And the king of Gath. The king of Gath. Now, I want you to understand, this is crazy. Because the king of Gath is a Philistine. This is the town where you walk into town and everybody knows you killed 10,000 or some thousands of your family members. You know, this is not, even though they're a subdued people, if you're by yourself or just with a handful, my goodness, I mean, the revenge factor is huge. They're not going to like you. But he somehow feels like this is safer than being out there with, he's stuck between two kings, really. He's between a real rock and a hard spot. And so, that's why I'm asking, what was he thinking? Why would he go there? What in his mind made him think it was safer? Well, here's my suggestion, and I'd like to hear yours, is they at least knew that he conquered Goliath, and he must be thinking, well, they'll still respect me for who I am and what I did. In fact, as you continue on, the servants of Achish actually did say this: "Is this not David, the king of the land? Did they not sing one to another of him in dances, saying, Saul hath slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s? And David laid up these words in his heart, and was sore afraid of Achish, the king of Gath." So now he's afraid of the other king. And so to survive, he has to come up with another tactic. Here's his tactic. This is what he does. He changes his behavior before them, and he feigns himself mad in their hands. And he scrabbled on the doors of the gate. He starts scribbling on the doors of the gate. And letting his spittle fall down upon his beard. Then said Achish unto his servants, Lo, ye see the man is mad. Wherefore then, that means why, then have ye brought him to me? Have I need of madmen, that ye have brought this fellow to play the madman in my presence? Shall this fellow come into my house? So what's David going to do now? He's looking for security. Couldn't find it in the man of God. Couldn't find it in the house of God. He certainly can't find it in the enemy camp. So chapter 22, David departs and heads to the caves of Adullam, which we'll pick up next week. and what happens there. And what we'll talk about there is how his family is going to get layered into his. It almost reminds me, I always wonder if some of these stories that happen in life later on, the story of Robin Hood, has a lot of similarities to the story that's happening here, Robin and his band of merry men. I mean, that's kind of built on the story of David. If you look at it, there's lots of similarities to it.
And by the way, I read Psalm 142. It looks like that goes along with the cave. It says a prayer when he was in the cave. Psalm 142.
So you want to read some of that psalm to us real quick?
I cried unto the Lord with my voice unto the Lord did I make supplication. I poured out my complaint before him. I showed before him my trouble. When my spirit was overwhelmed within me, then thou knewest my path. In the way wherein I walked, have they privily laid a snare for me. I looked on my right hand and beheld, but there was no man that would know me. Refuge failed me. No man cared for my soul. I cried unto thee, O Lord. I said, Thou art my refuge and my portion in the land of the living. Attend unto my cry, for I am brought very low. Deliver me from my persecutors, for they are stronger than I. Bring my soul out of prison, that I may praise thy name. The righteousness shall compass me about, for thou shalt deal bountifully with me.
Now you asked a question earlier, and I'm gonna make a comment on it. You said, when did he write this stuff? Now in that he sounds like he's in the situation when and so I have to believe that just as anything gets written, it's part of something that's stewing in you for a while, and you eventually maybe put it all together. But it starts at some point with thoughts and ideas. And we know that when he was out sitting with his sheep, out in the field, that he probably composed music and composed songs, and probably songs to the Lord. We know he sang. And so he had a habit of this, communion with the Lord. And I can't help believe but that when he's sitting by himself or with a few, these as a fugitive, that it's natural for him to talk to the Lord, and say, Lord, what's going on? I mean, don't we do that? And Bob, go ahead.
In the chronological Bible, we will intersperse these psalms into places where they were actually written. So my first thing is I'm going to go home and look at Samuel and see where these psalms are interspersed in there, because it's written chronologically, not by book, which is very helpful a lot of time when you're studying things to understand. Like when he wrote Psalm 52, it's just kind of tweaked my interest when he writes Psalm 52 about Doeg. He had betrayed him so bad.
So it's interesting. First Samuel doesn't. There's no hint, or I'm going to guess there's no hint that he cried out to God. We don't see that.
Right.
It appears, but yet Psalm 142 is so clear that he was in the cave crying out to God.
Right. The same thing with Psalm 56.
Well, this is specific. My note says David wrote the psalm upon the disparity of his soul in the cave in 1 Samuel 22:24.
Which we'll get to. That's what
So he sought the Lord first before he could rationalize to make a decision on going with either king. So he's went to the Lord for questioning.
Well, he doesn't until afterward when he's in the cave.
So he sought the Lord first before he went mad, rational. Went to the gates of the gate.
No, we don't see that he did.
He was at the bottom.
He does later, though. You'll see that later. But Psalm 52 references the situation at, basically with Doeg. It says to the chief musician, Maskil, a psalm of David, when Doeg the Edomite came and told Saul and said unto him, David is come to the house of Ahimelech. That psalm is referencing what we're getting ready to read in verse 9 of chapter 22, when Doeg answers Saul and says, I saw the son of Jesse come into Nob to Ahimelech the son of Ahitub. That's what you're going to read ahead for next week, okay?
So it looks like David just says, you're a bad person and God's going to church.
Right. But the beauty of it is we get to see inside of, because of the Psalms, we get to get into David's head, so to speak. We get to see what he's thinking. That's one character in the Bible we get to do that with. We hardly get to do with any others in the same way. So we see the external story, read the Psalms to know what he's thinking about it, and we're going to see him come back to start to get his consultation from the Lord, his directions from the Lord, very, very soon here. And he's going to start taking charge of the situation. And at least in chapter 23, verse 4, then David inquired of the Lord yet again. So he's getting back on the right track, okay? And God will start bringing him forward. So the lesson is, when you start going down the spirally, slippery slope, of your own thinking, just stop and consult with the Lord, and He will direct you. James says, any man lack wisdom, let him ask of God, which giveth to all men how? Liberally. And guess what? He doesn't scold you. And He upbraideth not. That means scold. And then it says, but you got to ask in faith, right? Nothing wavering. For he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea, driven of the wind and tossed. Let not that man think that he shall receive anything of the Lord. God wants our complete trust in Him. And we're going to see, we saw David wavering here, but we're going to see him come back to the source of truth. Okay?
So what David did, he didn't look to the right nor to the left, so he just kept going straight. David did, that's what he did. He didn't look to the other king, and he didn't go to Saul. So he told, David didn't go to the right nor the left, so he kept on his straight path, like God planned attended him with it.
Well, he got off the path a little bit here, but he's going to get back on the path that he got off. He should not have gone into Gath with the Philistine king. That was a bad idea.
If we could, oftentimes, you ask a question about David, like, what's he thinking? Why, he like Bob said earlier, Goliath, and he trusted them with the sling, but now he's like this. But oftentimes, we face Goliaths, and God pulls through, but then a month later or whatever down the road, you get in another situation, and you're doing just like him. And I was just also thinking right now, looking at, like, if you get into what you're talking about right now, and being in between the kings, if you put yourself in that picture, it kind of gives you a little anxiety of what's he doing. But see, we know the end of the story. And God knows the end of the story. And God, we're sitting here, it's like you get intense, but it's like, why worry? We already know what's going to happen. Well, God looks at us in the same way. And if we would just, remind myself of that and remember that when I'm in a situation going, what are you tripping on? God He's already right here.
So that's like when you make a decision. So that's like when you face with a decision when all pressure and tranquility is right there, where everything due to a breaking point. So David didn't go into a breaking point. Yes, he did. It's because when he came out of self and actually put on another mask, goes back to the book of Ezekiel, where Ezekiel went dramatic. he did Ezekiel and went dramatic and started acting crazy. He acted out.
Wow.
It's like, for us, sometimes we pray for God to do something for us, or we pray a request that we have, or whether it be a situation, problem, physical, financial, whatever, and we're expecting God to provide an answer this way, and instead he answers this way, and sometimes because he didn't answer the way we thought that he should have, we disregard the answer that's right in front of us. And David, if he had looked to the Lord, God had the answer, as we've learned later on. God had the answer right before him. But because he did not trust the Lord's leading and went over on this way here on his own, That's why he ended up in so much trouble.
Yeah.
So that's like when you raise your child, actually, okay, you got one child consistent being raised from God's actually raising a child from an infant in the church, under the church, around Christians. Then when that child wander off, you're like, what happened? That's like the actually questioning your need, the actually light bulb will go off, like, okay, so it's not going to go off, wandering off in the wilderness alone. He's going to come back eventually, because it's like God's the good shepherd. Actually, when the shepherd loses one of his sheep, the shepherd goes after that sheep and bring that sheep back to the ark of safety.
Right.
And keep them gathered around the company at the same time. Only if that person does not allow and accept and still keep fighting against the grain instead of going with the flock.
Amen. Well, we're out of time. You guys can talk all you want, but do you have a song?
I do.
And you can fellowship all you want to, but I'm trying to keep it as tight as I can. Okay.
532 in times like these. We're going to sing the third verse, which is just making the first verse personal. 532.
Okay.
First verse is, in times like these, you need a Savior. We're going to sing the third, which is, in times like these, I need a Savior. Yeah. Easy to look back. Hindsight's 2020. Would have been good for David to say this at this point in his life. Not that we can say we would have done any different than he did, but third verse. In times like these.